Hey everybody, it is me. I had to start this video again because I wanted to get it at a better angle, and it doesn't look like it's going to be at a better angle because I can't find my other wire stands, and the ones that I ordered continue to not be able to be delivered by Amazon for reasons. That's a completely different video, quite honestly. But an equally annoying one, as I would feel. Anyways, I had wanted to make this video or talk about this. Whether or not I actually were to post it is a completely different thing. There are a number of creators out there, independent-wise, who I don't know how to say it without just saying it, just blatantly rip off IPs. And I don't mean it from like these real bad knockoffs. I mean it in the sense that these are people who are fairly well known in the industry. And I wasn't sure how to like make a video and say something without somebody being like, well, you're just jealous, or, you're being a troll, or we should be building each other up and things like that. And while those are all legitimate claims, those are all legitimate arguments, legitimate sides of things, I should say, this particular individual, I'm not really sure what he's done with his career outside of being like mentored by Rob Liefeld, and for a good portion of time up until, I don't know, like the last 10 years maybe, being like a knockoff, kind of in the same way that Greg Capullo's artwork in the early to mid 90s was a direct McFarlane knockoff. And don't get me wrong, like I'm not shitting on Capullo. That's what he was brought in to do, right? And in some sense, I think that's what this guy was brought in to do. But then he carried that on like through his career up until a point where he just decided to stop trying and decided it would be a good idea to just blatantly steal intellectual properties from the IP holders themselves, that being Marvel, that being Disney, that being DC. And some people might argue and say, well, some of these characters are in the public domain. Okay, but not when he started making parodies or satires or whatever you want to call them of these characters. And a good portion of what he's been creating and still creating, and again, when I say creating, I use that term extremely loosely, because if all you're doing is taking work that somebody else or some other company, whether you like them or not, I don't really respect Disney. I don't really respect Marvel, and to an extent, I don't respect DC. Because of what they've done and what they continue to do to the industry, and Disney trying to copyright and own everything, and and it kind of revolves around this character as well, or this knockoff of this character, because Disney refused to faithfully bring out the actual numbers on their sales of this specific character, and he was the highest financial success for Disney for 15, 20 years, right? And Disney wouldn't open up their books to show the family, the people who actually owned this character, and all the subsequent characters. Sorry, there was a barking fit that I had to address. So anyway, it'll just give everything away. Right? So I don't really want to say his name, even though you'll be able to figure out who it is. I even asked the question on a post one time where they were promoting their book, and I'm just like, how the fuck do you get away with blatantly stealing characters like Harley Quinn and Winnie the Pooh and Tigger and Venom and Deadpool? How do you get away with that? And the response was, I don't remember it verbatim, but the response was something along the lines of, they know parody law very well, or they know the rules of parody law and copyright infringement very well. And so they were essentially towing the line years before Winnie the Pooh went to the public domain, right? And now that Winnie the Pooh, Tigger, Piglet are in the public domain, people have taken it upon themselves to make a ludicrous amount of comics, movies, just really crap knockoff stuff that probably was in the works beforehand. And there are some people who have projects that were immediately launched on like crowdfunding sites the instant Winnie the Pooh or the instant Tigger went on public domain, or the instant Steamboat Willie went to public domain. And as much as I don't respect Disney, as much as I don't respect Marvel and DC, because of how much they've really destroyed the industry, destroyed creators, made it unprofitable to be a creator unless you do stuff like this, unless you just spit out lowest common denominator shit. You're still stealing intellectual properties. You're still profiting off of intellectual properties created, curated, built, invested in, and instilled upon for years, sometimes decades, right? Winnie the Pooh had been around for, what, a century? Steamboat Willie had been around for, what, almost a century. What was it, like the late 20s or early 30s that he was originally created? But then you're knocking off characters and you're mashing them together, and then you're taking characters like Harley Quinn and giving her like a really dumb name, and claiming that this character was kicked out of the industry because she didn't fit a certain statistic of beauty, and you call her something like hardly thin. Yet all the artistic portrayals of this character don't show her as curvy, don't show her as thick, none of that. So I guess it's supposed to be a joke within a joke within a joke, but it lands extremely flat. And it's kind of the same base bullshit that led me to make this video, because this same creator has now made a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive cover of a moment in American history that's not a proud moment in American history, a moment that just happened and will live in infamy for at least the next 4 or 5 years, because people will use it and milk it for all they can, which is exactly what this individual is doing, which is, I don't know their personal politics. I don't know which way they lean or don't lean. Honestly, I don't care. It's gross. It's fucking disgusting to capitalize on that shit. And the fans that are like commenting on this, they're like, dude, you're going to sell out. I need a copy of this. I need 5 copies of this. Please save one for me. I need to get it signed. Like all this stuff. This is what's wrong with the comic book industry, right? Nobody concentrates on actual character development, quality storytelling, and building long-term storytelling. right? It's the entertainment industry as a whole. You could argue that with professional wrestling, that until very, very recently, a certain captain of industry of a major wrestling company had no attention span for doing long-term storytelling, right? And would just, do something for a month or two, and then he'd get bored with his toys and he'd do something else. But he wanted this one toy to be, the brightest and shiniest, but just couldn't commit to long-term storytelling, right? And so now that he's not in that position anymore, you have somebody who actually has been paying attention to things for the past 30 years. And he knows how to do long-term storytelling. He's been telling the story since 2022, right? All the way through to 2024. That's 2 years of storytelling for one wrestler or a couple of wrestlers, but still. But it's long-term storytelling and it's come back. Now, this kind of shit where you're making a meme, that's some TikTok level thing. It's going to pay off in the short term. Why? Because it's on the forefront of people's minds and they recognize it instantaneously. But you're not doing yourself a service as a creator. I had very little respect for this individual before this publicity stunt. And I don't know what is less than no respect for somebody at all. I just said I had very little respect for them. That's a nice way of saying I had no respect for them. Because if your whole deal is stealing IP, you're no better than a fan artist who's just, all they're doing is producing fan art. They're not doing their interpretation of it. They're not doing anything original for themselves. They're not creating their own characters. They're not doing this as a means to an end. Like, I'll admit it, man. I used to make fan art prints of like Marvel and DC characters. I didn't want to. I did it so that people would see artwork behind me and it would be colorful and it would stand out. And it did. It got people to stop and notice things. It got people to laugh and joke about stuff. It got guys to jokingly buy a print of naked Thor for their friend who liked Thor, or somebody to stop and buy the print for their mom because their mom loves Thor, or something along those lines. And now I've gotten to a point with working on my own characters and my own IP and my own creative endeavors and my own ability to do character development and long-term storytelling, that I don't rely on any of that anymore. The only stuff I have that's fan art based is one-offs, sketch cards, sketch covers, commissions, things like that. I'm not going to be doing prints of somebody else's IP, right? The only way I would do that is if somebody commissioned me to do a piece for their comic, and part of the agreement was this original piece that you produce for me, like I'm paying you for it and it's going to be used in publication, but you are also allowed to make prints of this. But there would have to be a contractual agreement that says I have that right to do that. Verbal, whatever, however, like written in an email or what have you, so that it can be backtracked as this not being fan art for the sake of fan art, but this being, you're basically licensed to do this kind of stuff. And just because you've worked on an IP doesn't mean you have a right to just blatantly rip it off and try to secure it by mashing it together with other IP and then using that as a way to, I don't know if poke fun at or celebrate I don't know how to say this without just saying it. It's Marat Michaels' Do You Poo moments after the assassination attempt on former president. I don't like to say that guy's name, right? Because I don't like to give him power or recognition or fucking whatever. It's a lot more effort than saying his name, but it's kind of what I choose to do. So, what did this fucking happen on Saturday? It's Tuesday. It's 3 days after the fact. There are, and I'm not just hitting him, and I could be somebody saying like, well, congratulations, you're learning how to capitalize on stuff. You've been ripping off IPs and characters for over a decade now. I think it was 2014 when I first saw Hardly Thin. Like, it's not like this is new shit for this individual, right? So you take a moment, a dubious moment at best, in recent American history, current events, as it were. You're capitalizing on it to make money and make more of a name for yourself. And there's probably going to be a lot of people who are like, you're supporting the guy who, you know, got shot or almost got shot or whatever. Not by a long shot, all right? I'm wearing a fucking t-shirt right now that says, we don't negotiate with racists. What I'm saying is you are taking moments that don't belong to you. You are taking characters that don't belong to you, and you are capitalizing on that. You are blatantly infringing on those things. Now, I don't care if companies come after you for copyright infringement. I don't care if campaigns come after you because, I don't know, that just seems like a dick move on my estimation. And you're going to make money off of it, which I guess that dude would approve of because that's what he fucking does all the time, right? He like takes shit, he slaps it on a t-shirt, he puts it on a hat, puts it on fucking ugly ass shoes or a Bible or whatever, and he makes money off of it. That's the capitalist idea of how do I get rich quick, right? But none of this fixes shit in a lot of ways, and I'm gonna tell you why. It doesn't fix anything long term because all you're doing is putting money in your pocket now. You're not building anything for the future. You're not building anything for everybody who's coming after you, and you're not doing a service to the fucking giants whose backs you stand on. Whether or not I like Rob Liefeld, and I don't really care for him. I'm not going to sit here and talk shit about him right now because that's not the point of this story. You're standing on the back of the guy who helped build your career, who got you in the door. You have skill and ability. I'm not going to say talent because talent implies that there's not a lot of effort on your part. There's a lot of concerted effort on Marat Michael's part to take fucking shortcuts and to take the easy way out. And he's not the only one, but he's the one I'm concentrating on right now because of what he just produced in terms of taking a moment in current events that we shouldn't be proud of. I don't care how you lean. Dude, that's fucked up to profit off of that. Like, that shows a couple of things. That kind of shows where you are from a psychological standpoint. And it also shows where you are from a maturity standpoint. This is the equivalent of dick and fart jokes, in my estimation. This is what Kevin Smith is doing 30 years after he made the movie Clerks. He hasn't done anything of that level of substance, and he's made strides and efforts to do certain things, and he's succeeded and failed a number of different times, right? But some of his latest efforts have just been lazy. I mean, when you have that name and you have that following, you don't really have to try. You don't have to put in any effort. Meanwhile, creators like myself who are still trying to figure out how to get that foothold, because nobody, and I'm not feeling sorry for myself, don't get me wrong, nobody has stuck their neck out for me and opened the door for me to get where you are, or to have the chance to get where you are. And there's a number of reasons why. I'm an abrasive guy. I don't take advantage of those situations maybe when I should. And there's a couple of other things. There's a lot of security in having to have a full-time job because I need benefits. I need a retirement fund, right? I have health issues that I can't take those types of risks on. I believe in myself, but I believe in myself in the long term. I am working on my portfolio. I haven't touched pencil to paper on a comic book in a couple of weeks now. And even then, before then, it was months since the last time I worked on my Welcome to Pleasant Falls graphic novel. These kinds of creators, I'm not just limiting it to Murat. These kinds of creators are the problem with this industry right now, because, yeah, you might see them and be like, wow, like $50,000, $100,000 on that crowdfunding campaign. They're not telling stories, yo. They're not building quality characters at all. Everything they do is a meme. And what does that do? It hurts the comic book industry. It hurts the history of what we've done. It hurts the future of what other people coming up, young or not so young, wanting to do something in this industry. You're not helping that. You're looking out for yourself, and that's fucked up, because this industry has too long been about looking out for yourself. That happened in the 80s and 90s at Marvel, and that's why those guys left and founded Image. And then they all got egos and only looked out for themselves and gatekept and kept people out. And here we are now, 30-something years later, and it's the same mentality of get rich quick, don't work especially hard, do the bare minimum, and just fucking rip off everything that came before you. This cat doesn't have an original bone in his body. I would dare him to come up with something on his own and see how that does. Because he, like I said, he's got skill, he's got ability. He's been doing this for years. And dare I say it, even if only half of the people who follow his current bullshit trajectory followed him over to something original and something good and something quality, it'd be a better industry. Same thing with all these other creators out there who are, for lack of better terminology, making dick and fart jokes with their comic books. And that's just all like the NSFW stuff. That's the risque or pornographic covers and content for things. Don't get me wrong, I like that stuff every once in a while, okay? But if that's the basis of your storytelling, and your storytelling isn't good and your characters are one-dimensional, that's the equivalent of deathmatch wrestling, garbage wrestling, right? Everything in my life can be summed up or can be related to one of four things: movies, music, comics, and wrestling. And in this case, it's comics and wrestling intertwining. And it's comics being portrayed as garbage wrestling. As much blood and weapons and as little storytelling as you can possibly muster, and let's just bleed and land on sharp things for 20 minutes in front of 50 people. Or we could work a little bit harder and work a lot smarter. And you could be doing less damage to yourself, your reputation, and the industry as a whole in front of 12,000 people in a main event. where no blood is shed, where nobody gets hit in the face with a light tube. Nobody has to land on thumbtacks, right? Because you learn how to tell a story and you learn how to be a creator and a creative force instead of doing this lowest common denominator crap. I don't get it. I don't get it at all. Euthanasia was the first book that I ever tried to produce. I thought it was going to catch fire. I thought people were going to love it. I was so sure of it. But it was so niche that if I had kept on much longer than I did, and thankfully I didn't have much of a following at that point, because if I did, creating some of the later stories, issues 6, 7, and 8 was a good story arc that didn't end well. And then issue 9 delved into full-on porn and debauchery because that's where my mind went. And I can't blame it all on the fact that I was drunk most of the time I was working on that book. But here's the thing, man. Had I had a following like that, like this guy has, like Marat has right now, when I did that issue, I guarantee you those people would be gone and they wouldn't return. And I would have damaged my reputation as a creator. And you can't get that back, right? Because nobody, and I can't remember the name of the wrestler, right? And he's one of the biggest deathmatch wrestlers right now. He almost killed David Arquette. He wrestled Chris Jericho, and and if he heard me not be able to remember his name, he'd probably want to kill me. He almost died in a death match, right? In the middle of a field where he was stabbed in the armpit with something, a light tube or whatever. And nobody would remember him now, right? Nobody's going to pay that guy. Nobody's going to pay to see that guy do headlocks and suplexes. They want to watch him bleed. They want to watch him stab other people. They don't want to see him wrestle. They don't even want to see him fight. They just want to see him, it's sad, really. And he probably makes a lot of money, and somebody could be like, well, look at his bank account versus your bank account, and that's fine. I'll be the guy who doesn't make as much money doing one thing like those guys, and I'll be the guy who makes the money and has the success and has the name and has the respect in the long run. And the respect for myself, most importantly, because there are some ideas I have floating around in my head, but I don't want that to be all I do, right? I don't want people to see me and be like, oh yeah, Jax, he's the guy who does the titty books, right? Yeah, the artwork is nice to look at, and the stories are kind of weak, and the characters, I don't care about the characters. I just want to see them bang and, have happy endings and stuff like that. Like, I don't care about anything else. Like, I don't respect the creator, but he's the guy who does that. I'll be the guy who does the silly book about his dogs as superheroes. I'll be the guy who takes forever to put out a horror graphic novel that has substance and character development in it versus being that person who takes that shortcut any day of the week and, rips off IPs and then capitalizes on something that we shouldn't really be proud of by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not going to shame him or anything, but Marat Michaels, man, like, I don't have any respect for that shit, right? I don't have any respect for the work that you've done, the creations and the creating that you've supposedly done over the last 10 or so years. And I definitely don't have any respect for this latest publicity stunt. That's all.